I was so into this story. I know marketing is a big topic, and you can take a whole degree or a semester of class. So if you have any more questions, feel free to talk to Dr. Xie after this session. So our next presenter is Guangming Fang. She's going to discuss the legal aspects of doing business in U.S. Welcome.
So when Jen talked to me about coming to do this, I really thought hard about what to talk to y'all in 15 minutes, and I decided eventually to start from the beginning. But I'm going to depending, because people are in different stages of doing business in the U.S., so some of it may not be even relevant to those of you who have a company here already. So I'm going to run through some of the things very quickly and hopefully focus on once you have a company, what are you going to do? What are you going to do differently than you otherwise would in China? So, but anyhow, so I'm going to try to follow this, but probably not strictly. Well, I'm going to run through the formation of a company very quickly, because assuming that some of you already have that, so that may not be relevant. But anyhow, so when the first thing you want to do when you decide to come to the U.S. and start your own company is that what kind of company type do I want to have? And it's not like flip the coin and just, oh, LLC, everybody talks about LLC, I'm going to have an LLC. It's not that kind of decision, okay? So in the US, you have corporations, you have limited liability companies, you have partnerships, and within partnerships, you have all sorts of partnerships. And how do I make that decision? Which entity is the right type for me? It's going to take me days to tell you all the things about this, but it's suffice to say that it should be a decision that you talk to your legal advisor and your tax advisor about, because the two important things that drive which entity is the right thing for you is management and tax considerations. Unless you're in a very special business, real property, for example, not a whole lot of people use partnerships now. There are some professional partnerships, and there's some business that, if you focus on real estate, some people still use partnerships. So I'm not going to talk about that. But well, go back a little bit. So company type is one thing. Tax is all. When you do business in the U.S., tax is everywhere, okay? So just keep that in mind. Everything that you want to do, you have to think about tax. And if you're a brand new company and thinking about making a big investment in the U.S., and you're coming from China, you're talking about buying land, building, hiring people, economic development incentives is, you have to think about that, because if you don't, you're leaving a big chunk of money on the table that you are not using. But with that said, economic development incentives shouldn't be the driving factor for your decision as to where to go, where to set up your company. Why? Even though that means money, why is it not the driving factor? Because if your business, for example, needs a lot of R&D capability, then you need to be near university, right? You need to be near the source of the workforce that you want to attract. If your business is very labor intensive, maybe you want to be in the rural area where the labor is a lot less expensive and the incentives are higher. But if you are in the technology business, you want to be near UGA or Georgia Tech or some of those places where you can attract the labor. So human resources, how do you manage that? That's a very important factor to consider. Intellectual property protection. U.S. companies, when they invest in China, when they go to China, that's one thing they always talk about, especially if you're a technology company. It's the same for you. Don't think that people are here are not ethical or none of that. You have to understand how to protect your intellectual property using the right tools that are available for you in this environment, in this legal system. So these are some of the major factors that you have to consider when you're thinking about starting your own business, and whether you are already in the U.S. and starting your own business, or whether you're from China and thinking about coming here. Company type, I already touched on that. There are various company types in the US that are available to you. I'm not going to get into partnerships. If you are interested about learning anything about partnerships, come to me. I'll be happy to talk to you because they're just not commonly used unless you're in a very special business. One thing I do want to say, and I'm just going to say it once, is that never, ever, ever do business as a sole proprietorship. A sole proprietorship means that I'm just going to be Guangming Fan, I'm just going to hang up my sign, and I'm going to do business in my own name. Don't do that. It's very, very simple to form an LLC, and if you do that, just hang up your name, do business in your own name. By the way, if you haven't already, please turn off your phone, okay? It's just, we work hard on this, so I want to be respected. Because if you just hang up your sign, do business under your own name, all of the business liabilities now are your personal liabilities. You do not want your wife, your children, your husband, your whatever to share your business liabilities, okay? Very simple, form an LLC if nothing else, okay? So that's the end of that discussion. Just get it out of your mind. Do not do business in your own personal name. It's all you need to remember. Okay, how to choose? Back to that question. So corporations have what is called the double taxation issue. When a corporation makes money, the corporation itself has to pay corporate income tax. And then when you distribute the profit to your shareholders, the shareholders have to include that in their personal income tax and they have to pay tax again. So that's the so-called double taxation. But corporations have a lot of benefits, okay? There are a lot of things that corporations can do that LLCs cannot. So it's not like because it has double taxation, I'm not going to do that. That's not the case. For example, if your business has a good potential of needing to raise capital from private investors, you are much better off having a corporation because you can structure your equity, your stock a lot easier. You can be a lot more flexible structuring your stocks in order to attract investment. LLCs, you can do that. It's very, very complicated. It's very, very expensive, and the accountants don't like to deal with it. Liabilities of the shareholders, equity holders is not a big issue right now because most of the business entities, equity holders are protected by limited liability. Their liabilities are limited to the investment. Stock and management are big factors when you're deciding whether you have a corporation or LLC. And a lot of things, a lot of factors go into that consideration. What is the nature of my business? What are my projections in the next few years? What are my exit strategies? Am I going to sell my companies in 10 years, 5 years? Am I going to take it public? Am I going to grow it? Am I going to pass it down to my children? All these things will affect what kind of business type that you should have. It can be changed. If you choose to be an LLC, you can convert it to a corporation later on. But there are restrictions, okay? Because of the different tax obligations and tax liabilities, IRS does not want you to change it back and forth anytime you want to. They don't want you to game that system. So there are restrictions. It's not like if you want to change it, you can change it tomorrow. It's not like that. So just keep that in mind. Okay? All corporations are governed by state law. So if you form an entity in Georgia, you are governed by Georgia corporate statutes. If you want to form a company in Texas, then the Texas law governs. And if you want to form a company in Georgia and then you want to do business in Texas, for example, you have to go to that state and register with that state because they want to tax you. They can't go to that state, do business, and don't pay tax. Okay? So bottom line is that there are a lot to know about each corporate entity, but unless you just want to form a company on the side just to play with, a lot of people do that, and there's nothing wrong with that. If you are serious about developing a business, you need to get professional advice on this. It's not a question that you can just make on your own. A lot of people do, and a lot of times they happen to be the right one for them, but a lot of times they get it wrong. And if you get it wrong, there will be consequences. And sometimes it can be more expensive to fix a problem than to get it right the first time, okay? And because it involves tax in all these decisions, so having an accountant in the conversation will be very, very helpful, okay? This, I really want to just fly through it very quickly. How to register a company? If you want to do it yourself, go on the Secretary of State's website. There's almost every Secretary of State has a corporate division. They call it differently. They go by different names, but in Georgia it's called the corporate division. You can just click on it, surf, and learn about it, and you can even form the entity online. But that's not the end of forming an entity. You can register it online. That's fine. Very, very easy. And a lot of times I'll tell people that if you are, unless you are just like setting a company on the side to play with, or that situation, a lot of people in the Chinese community, you all know that people who form an LLC go own real property, renovate the houses and sell them out. That's fine. You can do it on your own. If you're serious about doing the business, you do not register online, because the information that is required for you to fill in online to form the entity is the very bare minimum that the statute requires. There are a lot of protection, like for example, the statute would say that you, unless your articles of incorporation provides otherwise, these are the default rules. And sometimes you don't want those default rules to apply to you. So you want to change that in your articles of incorporation. For example, director liabilities, you want your directors not to have personal liability from the business liabilities. So that you have to specify in your articles of incorporation. If you do that online, that's not a required field that you have to fill in. So if you're serious about your business, you need to have a lawyer to help you to form it and to draft the proper document. Okay? After you register the company, these are the important, very, very important things that you must do to have a proper entity form. You have to adopt bylaws if you are a corporation. You have to appoint officers and directors, and you have to issue a stock so that people know who your stockholders are. Even if it's just yourself, you can be the sole shareholder, you can be the sole director, you can be the sole officer, you can be the company, but you have to go through all these steps to properly put yourself in the right position, okay? If you're a limited liability company, the one beauty about limited liability companies is it's a lot more flexible, it's less regulated, it's a much newer animal type. So you have one document that you have to worry about is the operating agreement. And you have to, and you can, I mean, if you have several shareholders forming an LLC together, a lot of things can be negotiated. And that's the document where you negotiate a lot of the terms, management and everything. So one more thing about corporate entity. If you're doing a business with another partner, a shareholder, put things down in writing. A handshake deal doesn't work. I'm going to talk more about that later on if I have time. But you know, if two buddies coming together and doing business, I mean, everything, of course, is, I mean, rosy, promising, glowing. I mean, you have a wonderful future ahead of you. That's what you're looking at. That's why you get into business in the first place. But trust me, things will happen. And you need that document when things do happen, okay? I can't tell you how many times people are burned by not having things down in writing. Even if this is your childhood friend that you've known your whole life, if you're getting into business together, you have to have a shareholders agreement or a very well negotiated operating agreement. So I'm interested, this is more for like Chinese investing here in the US. I wanted to say, a lot of times Chinese companies will ask me whether there's any restriction on how much the company they can own. The answer is no, very flexible. You just have to be very careful about negotiating that joint venture agreement. Okay, taxes. This is a list of some of the most common taxes that a company is faced, will have to pay anywhere, pretty much. You have corporate income tax, both at the federal level and the state level. If your shareholder is a foreign entity, your parent company is a Chinese company, anytime you distribute a dividend or any profit to them, there's a withholding tax requirement on the U.S. company. You have to, because the U.S. government can't go to China to tax that shareholder. They want you, the U.S. company, to withhold the tax and pay on their behalf. So that's the withholding tax. Property tax, if you own real property, tangible property, inventory, all of that are subject to taxes. Sales and use taxes, payroll taxes. I mean, you all know if you work in the U.S. that a big chunk of your money is gone every time you see that paycheck, right? Because that's the payroll tax, Social Security, workers' comp, everything. So most of times I tell people, don't try to run it yourself. Try to do it yourself because it's too complicated. It's very easy to get it wrong. It's relatively inexpensive to outsource that kind of service to another company. Accounting firms, some accounting firms do it. ADP definitely is one of the big names. Outsource it is relatively expensive, and you can focus your energy and your resource on your business. Okay, just a few words about economic development incentives. Every state has that, they offers that. Just like those economic development zones in China, every government is trying to offer something to attract business to their region. The US is the same. Georgia has a wonderful incentive program. Okay, but as I said earlier, that shouldn't be your driving decision as to where to locate. I mean, there are a lot of, you have to think about your potential customers. Where do you sell your property? Logistics, is that important to you, right? Your workforce, where do you, what kind of workforce you need? Where do you get them? Is it easy to get? Cost of living, cost of doing business, union issues. I mean, there are a lot of other issues. But once you have narrowed down a few places that kind of suit your needs, then if one state offers a better incentive package, of course you take that. That's money on the table, right? So take that. But I just want to say that when states decide what kind of incentives to provide and how much and all that, these are basically the things that they consider. How much you're investing, how many jobs you think your project is going to create for this location, what kind of business that you are bringing. High-paying jobs, they welcome that. Low-paying manufacturing jobs, probably not as much. If you're making the investment in a remote, less developed place, incentives are higher. If you're, setting up an office in downtown Atlanta, probably not as much. So those are some of the things that they will consider. Cash, tax credit, tax exempts, these are some of the types of credits that they provide. I list these things here is because a lot of these are dealt differently in China. So this presentation, when I first prepared it, it was really geared toward talking to a Chinese company coming to the U.S. Minimum wage is $7.25 here, and one thing that I really do want to emphasize if you are new to the U.S. is discrimination issues. It's a non-issue in U.S. and people get it wrong all the time. I mean, I have clients who got into trouble because of that. If you go to China, how many times you open the newspaper and you look at the job ads and it will say that I don't want anyone over 35 years old? And some people try to do that in the U.S., believe it or not. They try to do that in the U.S. No, you can't do that. Okay? Just a no-brainer for those who have lived in the U.S. for a long time, but it's very, very easy to trip yourself up on those things, okay? Intellectual property is something that I know very, very little about. So all I can tell you is that when people use the term intellectual property, these are what they're talking about. They're talking about patents, trademarks, copyrights, trade name, service marks, trade secrets, and confidential information. Confidential information is people don't think of that as intellectual property, but that is intellectual property. What is confidential information? Anything you don't want your competitor to know. What kind of pricing strategy I have? How do I come up with that price? I mean, Dr. Xie talked about pricing is very important. How do I came to that decision? who I'm talking to, what are my potential customers. Those are things that you ought to keep it to yourself, and even in casual conversation, you shouldn't talk about, and that's your intellectual property. And in the U.S., there are 3 bodies of laws that you can use and rely on to protect your intellectual property. And common law basically means a judge makes law. If you have a case, a judge has come out a certain way, and that sets a precedent, and that's part of the law that will govern your intellectual property. Okay, how much time do I have? Okay, so, but anyhow, so if nothing else, take a look at this list. This is what I want you to take away with for all this talk, okay? Put things down in writing. It's very, very important. Networking. That's important in China. That's critical in the US as well. A third thing is that, okay, I have to say a little thing. It sounds self-serving, but I mean every word of it is that service providers can provide value to you. Okay, that's it.
Thank you. It looks like the legal issue is longer than marketing issue.
Sorry about that.
All right, so I think she covered a little bit about taxes.